Here are 5 reasons that I think homeschooling is a better option for your child than public school. Reason number 5. I think that the social interactions that you get to have in a homeschooled setting are generally better and of a higher quality than the settings that you get in public school. I think that what a lot of people think is that if you go to public school, you get to be involved in all these clubs and sports and everything, and that if you're homeschooled, you have to stay at home, or if you are at home, you don't get to be involved in any of the clubs or sports that public schoolers are. However, that's not true. In many states nowadays, if you're homeschooled, you actually can be involved in all of the same things that anyone from public school is involved with as far as the extracurricular activities, but you don't necessarily have to go to the school because, hey, homeschoolers do still pay the school tax for their district that they are in, even though they don't use the school system. So in a lot of cases, those schools will allow homeschoolers to participate in those extracurricular activities. So as a homeschooler, I think in general, you actually get the opportunity, not that all homeschooled families take advantage of this, but there's a lot more opportunity because you have more time throughout the day. You can be involved in your community. You can be going to the nursing home and talking with older people there. You can be going to the community center and serving at the soup kitchen. You can be also, in addition to that, still getting to play sports, getting to be involved in theater at the public school, and still get a bit of that social interaction as well. So overall, I would say as a homeschooler, you actually get a much more diverse age group of people that you have the opportunity to socialize with. Of course, that's very much up to the parents, and the parents do have to be putting those opportunities out there for their children and driving them to those opportunities. So yes, there are always those homeschoolers who just stay at home 100% of the time. But with that being said, I think you just have opportunity for more as a homeschooler. Along with more opportunity for socialization, as a homeschooler, I had so much more opportunity to really dig into the passions and the things that I wanted to do. So if I wanted to learn about something in particular as an extracurricular, my mom could order a curriculum for me that would teach me about whatever I wanted to do. Or for instance, in some cases, it just allowed me the time to be able to do a pursuit that I wouldn't have otherwise had the time to do if I had been in public school for 8 hours of the day. So as a homeschooler, you have more time to be able to find what you are uniquely talented in and to continue pursuing activities in that sphere. For me, I liked the idea of having a homestead. I always wanted my own homestead once I grew up. And so my parents, as I got older, allowed me then to get some chickens and some honeybees and some goats. And so for a short little while, I was a little homesteader. But me and my siblings were primarily responsible for those animals. And so I had to learn about them. My dad would have us read books before we would get them. And so for me, that was something fun that I enjoyed doing. But I also enjoyed finance. I enjoyed making money. And so I would try to sell honey. I would try to sell goats. I'd try to sell basically anything I could make a product out of. And I know that sounds like super homeschooly type of items that you'd be interested in, but I know of people who were interested in coding, and so they got to be involved in that. I know people who were interested in computers, and so they got to take a computer apart, rebuild their own computers, and they got to have more free time to be able to chase those pursuits. The third thing that I do like about homeschooling that will be a little bit controversial is I do think that it does separate you as a person, or perhaps if it's your child, it separates your child from a little bit of those influences of other children. And what I mean by this is I know that bullying is very, very prevalent in public school. I'm not one of those people who's like, okay, never ever have anyone say something mean. Like, people are going to say something mean to you in real life. But when I was in there was less people around me of a setting, like for instance, there might be a cousin who disagreed with me and they're like, no, like, you're just being ridiculous or whatever. I could sit there, I could stand up for myself, and I didn't have like 500 other kids like coming in and being like, no, you're wrong and whatever, like just being aggressive about whatever the conversation was, like there was enough, like it was a small group of people, A, and B, there was enough like parents in the background doing something that no one was going to like overtly be like super aggressive or super rude to you because of that. Now, I do think that in real life there are rude people and they have to be addressed accordingly. But in my experience with my family and with individual friends, I got to experience people either disagreeing with me or being maybe a little bit rude, and I could sit there and just be like, you know what, that's not very nice, don't say that to me. And since then, being in the workforce, I have had a confrontation with someone who was my boss. I had a boss who was screaming at me, who was like, you're just being ridiculous, you're not listening to anything that I'm saying, and who was, just telling me that I wasn't even working at whatever he was asking me to do, but I had not been clarified with that. And so after that happened over about a week or 2 weeks, I was like, okay, listen, you cannot treat me like this. I won't allow you to treat me like this. That's not respectful to me as a human being. And so I was able to step up for myself. And I feel like because I was homeschooled and I had situations in smaller group settings where I had practiced standing up for myself, it was a lot easier to do than I think a lot of my public school counterparts who are just used to people putting them down. And so they're like, okay, fine, like I just suck up, I'll just do whatever I need to do to like kind of just push this into the background. Number 2 is going to be the amount of time that you get as a homeschooler. I think people really, really underestimate this. I went to private school until I was in 4th grade, and I sat there bored. I was a straight A student. I might have gotten a B here or there, but I for the most part was okay with learning. Like, I didn't hate school or learning, but they would sit there and talk about something for an excessive amount of time. And I remember sitting there, I would get my worksheet done before several of the other students, and I would have to sit there. I couldn't then go off and play. I couldn't do my own thing. I couldn't look for my own interests or pursuits or be creative. I had to just sit there and wait for other students to finish up their worksheets. Ironically, or maybe unironically, my favorite part about school was those 60-second math tests, where you had to just fill out the multiplication table for 60 seconds and everyone got the same amount of time. That was my most favorite because everyone was actually like hurrying up with their work. And I was one of those people where once I was able to be homeschooled in 5th grade, I was able to get my work done faster, and I still got very good grades, but I just was a quick learner. I like to read for myself what's going on rather than just being talked at in that sense. And so I was able to really take control of my learning a little bit more. And that allowed me to finish a lot of these subjects so much quicker than what they were doing in the public school or in a private school setting. The final point of why I think homeschooling is better than public schooling is individualized learning. You get to learn the way that it makes sense for you to learn. And even sometimes in different subjects, you get to learn in a different way. And so for me, I'm very much a reader. I love reading, and I would read my textbook. I would like fill out some questions about it, write some notes about it, and I did very well on my tests because of that, because I just absorbed knowledge through reading. Whereas my sister, actually, she thrived a little bit better when someone was telling her about it, when there was an interaction there, a relationship there, and someone was like, here's what you need to do for this. And so for her, when my mom was sitting there reading it with her, that allowed her to retain that knowledge a little bit better. And because we had those different learning styles, my mom was able to tailor our individual education accordingly. And so that allowed me to go ahead and be like, I'm going to be reading my subjects. I'm going to be absorbing this information. And then usually once I did have my own free time, I went off and read a book anyways because I enjoyed reading so much. So I was actually able to take a little bit more control over my own learning, learn at a pace and a way that made sense for me, and each of my siblings were able to do the same. When I got older and I was learning chemistry, that took me a bit longer to learn. It was just mind-boggling to me a little bit, and it was very difficult for me to read and comprehend and everything. And so for that particular year, my mom did sit next to me and read it through with me and explain it in a way that I could understand and that she could tell me as well. And so that allowed me, that accountability was good for me for that specific subject to be able to have. And I actually did complete chemistry in a year and a half instead of just a year. So I did that at a much slower pace, whereas my math, I finished in half a year. And so I was able to have that more slower paced learning for that subject. Now, with that being said, I did then go to a local college and do physics in a semester, and I did great with physics. I felt a lot more empowered to study physics. And with that being said, I was able to study each of these things at my own pace and actually learn and absorb the information that was needed. Now, could I sit here and give you a chemistry equation and figure it out today? Probably not. I don't know many public schoolers, though, who could sit there and give you a chemistry equation as well. So I think each person has things that they're better at and that they're worse at, and they have their strengths and their weaknesses. And I really think that with homeschooling, the individualized learning allowed us to shine in our strengths and work on our weaknesses in a way that made sense to us individually. All of that to say, I will be homeschooling my own children, and even though I don't have a degree in teaching, I love learning and I want to instill that love of learning into them. And I think that there is definitely a way that you can do that. I think that it's so beneficial as homeschooling to be able to come alongside your children and learn the things that they're learning as well, or relearn them again, because let's be honest, a lot of us did learn those things. It's just a matter of reading through it again. And you're able to then tailor the education to each child according as what their skill set is, and still getting all of the major functions in, but you're still allowing them plenty of time and plenty of resources that you can either get from a local college, get from a homeschool co-op, teach yourself. There are so many other resources that you get to take advantage of. If you enjoyed this conversation, I talk about a lot of different countercultural items, just framing our minds and our reference points in a completely different way than what culture has traditionally told us to do. And so I try to think from a different frame of mind and a different frame of reference. And if that's something that you're trying to do or that interests you, thinking about these topics from a little bit of a different perspective than what mainstream is, then go ahead and click that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much.